You're listening to Fishy Thoughts, the podcast where we deep dive into all things fishy. I'm your host, Nate from Nate's Tank, and every episode of this podcast, I'll be spotlighting one fish species, talking about where it comes from, why it matters, and what it can teach us, not just about aquariums, but the natural world itself. Alright, let's talk about a fish that almost guarantees a reaction the moment someone sees it for the first time. The blood parrot cichlid. You've probably seen one before. Bright orange, kind of round, almost balloon shaped, with a mouth that looks like it's stuck in a permanent grin. And usually the first response is either, "That's adorable," or "That fish looks wrong." And honestly, that reaction tells you everything you need to know about blood parrots. Because this fish sits right in the intersection of curiosity, creativity, controversy, and responsibility in the aquarium hobby. So let's start at the beginning. And in this case, the beginning isn't a river, a lake, or a stream. Blood parrots do not exist in the wild. There's no native habitat, no natural range, and no ecosystem where they evolved for thousands of years. They're entirely man-made, first bred in Taiwan sometime in the late 20th century. Now, most evidence points to them being hybrids of Midas and redhead cichlids, though exact breeding records were never officially published. And that lack of transparency is part of why they caused such a stir when they first appeared in the aquarium trade. Imagine walking into a fish store in the late 80s or early 90s and seeing a fish like this for the first time. Bright orange, round body, a face that doesn't quite look right. People were fascinated and confused. Because this isn't evolution. This was design. And once people realized that, the conversation changed. One of the most noticeable features of a blood parrot is their mouth. That small beak-like shape looks cute, but it comes with some real consequences. Some blood parrots struggle to eat efficiently. Others have trouble picking up certain foods at all. Add in potential spine deformities, and you start to see why this fish became controversial very quick. And this is exactly where the ethical debate begins. Is it okay to selectively breed fish for appearance, even if it increases the risk of physical challenges? Some hobbyists argue that creating hybrids like this crosses the line. Others believe that as long as a fish can live a comfortable, healthy life with proper care, then it's acceptable. And the truth is, blood parrots force us to sit with that discomfort. There's no clean, easy answer. What complicates this debate even more is their behavior. Because for all their physical quirks, blood parrot cichlids are not dull fish. In fact, they're often described as curious, social, and surprisingly expressive. They respond to changes in their environment, explore their surroundings, and interact with tank mates in ways that feel intentional. Some appear shy and cautious, others are bold and constantly on the move. And once you start noticing that, it's hard to not think of them as individuals, which makes the ethical question even harder to ignore. From a general care perspective, blood parrots are more resilient than people might expect. They prefer stable water conditions, moderate temperatures, and strong filtration. They're omnivores, meaning they'll accept a wide variety of food. Pellets, frozen foods, and plant-based options all play a role in keeping them healthy. They're usually not aggressive, but they are cichlids. That means territorial behavior can still show up, especially in cramped spaces. Giving them room isn't just a luxury, it's necessary. Now let's zoom out a little. Because this is where blood parrots connect to something much bigger than just aquariums. Even though blood parrots themselves don't exist in the wild, they represent a broader issue in fish keeping: the release of non-native species into natural ecosystems. Aquarium fish, hybrids or not, do not belong in local waterways. When fish are released intentionally or accidentally, they can compete with native species for food, alter habitats, and introduce diseases that wild fish have no defense against. We've already seen this happen with other cichlids. In places like Florida, non-native cichlids have established populations that permanently change local ecosystems. And once that happens, there's no easy way to undo the damage. A fish doesn't have to be aggressive to be harmful. Sometimes just being there is enough to disrupt everything. Blood parrots, in that sense, are a warning sign. They remind us that fish keeping doesn't end in the glass. Our decisions, what we buy, how we care for the fish, and what we do when we can no longer keep them, have consequences far beyond our homes. Another layer to this conversation is how blood parrots blur the line between nature and human preferences. They are not wild animals in the traditional sense, but they're not decorations either. They're living creatures shaped by selective breeding, by what humans decided looked appealing. And that forces us to ask a bigger question: when does appreciation turn into control? At the same time, blood parrots already exist. They're already a part of the hobby. So the conversation becomes less about undoing the past and more about how we move forward responsibly. That means discouraging extreme breeding practices, supporting ethical standards, and educating people about long-term responsibility. Because here's something that often surprises people: blood parrots can live a long time. With proper care, they can live 10 years or more. That's not a short-term commitment. That's a decade of care, observation, and responsibility. And that alone is why our research and our care matters in this hobby. Now, before I go, I want to leave you with this. Blood parrot cichlids may be one of the clearest examples of how humans influence the aquatic world. They didn't evolve naturally. They didn't adapt to a specific river or lake. They exist because people wanted something different. And that makes them something more than just a novelty. They're a lesson about responsibility, ethics, curiosity, and restraint. They challenge us to think critically about the choices we make as fish keepers, and how those choices ripple outward into the natural world. Because at the end of the day, fish keeping isn't just about what looks good in a tank. It's about understanding the lives we interact with and respecting the impact we have on them. Thanks for listening to the Fishy Thoughts podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, follow the podcast and share it with your fish nerd friends. Join the conversation over on my TikTok at Nate's Tank for more fish talk, tank tips, and content. Until next time, keep your tanks clean and your thoughts fishy.